In this video, we're gonna make this fake live edge charcuterie board. This is gonna be a fun one. Let's go. I love the look of live edge river charcuterie boards, but the thing about live edge boards is they're usually more expensive and they're usually more difficult to find. And so what we're gonna do with this charcuterie board is we're gonna fake a live edge. So we're gonna turn this square rectangular board into looking like a live edge river charcuterie board. What I'm doing here is taking a live edge board and I'm going to scribe a live edge onto this non-live edge board. While I'm sanding down these fake live edges, I'm really kind of breaking every rule for traditional sanding. I'm staying in one spot for longer than others. I'm just trying to hit different angles. I don't want this to be consistent at all. So here's what this fake live edge is looking like. I really don't like the look of fake live edge unless I'm going to hide it with epoxy, which I'm obviously doing for this project. So this should be okay. But we're pretty much good to move on to the next step. So now I'm going to arrange these two boards with my template. But once I have everything set up the way I like it, I'll trace this out. Now this is super, super important. You need to make sure that you have material all along the outside edge of the template here. Now obviously we're going to fill this in with epoxy, but like over here, you don't want this positioned like that because that's just not going to be good. It's not going to fit into the mold well. So with these templates, the idea is remove as much as you can with your bandsaw or with your jigsaw, but make sure you leave material that your router can remove so you get an accurate shape, essentially. Because if this shape isn't accurate, it's going to lead to problems when we go to do the epoxy pour down the road. Okay, I'm going to show you the template again. This time we've cut everything out on the bandsaw. And this is what I'm talking about when I say when you put all this back together, you want to have a pretty close shape, but you want to make sure you still have a little bit of excess all the way around your template. So when we route this, we can have our template to reference against. Okay, so just finished edge routing these with a flush trim bit. Kind of had a little bit of a mishap. I was finishing up, I'd finished this board right here, finished this board right here, and I was like, this is going great. And then a little bit of the handle of this black walnut exploded. Honestly, my router didn't even slip or anything. I guess it was just some weak grain, or maybe it was too small of a piece that I was trying to route, and so it just kind of started chipping away. So I'm basically going to trash that handle part. So all of this back here is going to be epoxy all the way down through here. Not really what I was hoping for in my original design. So we're just going to see how this goes. Okay, so we are ready for this epoxy pour. As you can see, this crafted element template that we routed everything out with makes these boards fit perfectly in this crafted elements mold. And what's awesome about these crafted elements molds, if you've never used them before, is they're reusable, they're leak proof. I'm literally pouring this on my table saw table, and I have no worries about this leaking whatsoever. So make sure when you're pouring any kind of epoxy project into a mold, the mold is level and flat. You don't want any kind of like bubbles underneath this mold, because that can cause epoxy to get in places it doesn't need to be. One more thing I would say when you're working with epoxy is make sure to just have everything laid out before you start your pour. This is pretty slow cure epoxy, but you want to make sure everything's ready. One more thing I'm doing here is I picked up these weights from Goodwill, and let's see here. I always want to make sure that I have a little bit of weight on these boards or any boards that I'm using in an epoxy pour, because you don't want these things floating up on you. So with that being said, I think we're ready for the pour. Oh, one more thing I want to show you is I've already done this, but you want to make sure you use some kind of mold release. And this is available on Crafted Elements website. I'll leave a link in the description. But this is a mold release that if you don't use this, it's going to be tougher to pull this out of the mold, but more importantly, it's going to really reduce the amount of times you're able to use these Crafted Elements molds. You might only get a couple of uses out of them if you don't use mold release, but if you use mold release every time and get all the edges and everything, you can use these, 20, 30 times, which you can definitely make your money back on. So I've got my epoxy mixed up here. I love Total Boat epoxy, and just make sure that you're using a epoxy that matches with your depth. This is good for up to 2 inch. This is their like Fathom thick set, which is good for up to 2 inch thick pours. And I'm using black diamond pigments for my color. I like to use powdered pigments versus liquid pigments just because I don't want the liquid to throw off my epoxy to hardener ratio. So, all right, enough stalling. Let's pour this in here. Make sure when you are planing your charcuterie board that you don't overwhelm your planer. My blades were pretty dull, and so that's about all that those blades can take. I need to change the blades in that planer. If you have that same planer, by the way, blades to that planer are linked down in the description if you need to get some replacements for yourself. But anyways, now it's time to start finishing up the charcuterie board. When we finish this, it's going to really come to life. So check this out. Okay, so next up, we're going to put a 1/4 inch, or actually, sorry, an 1/8 of an inch round over on this charcuterie board. Make sure, if you don't know which way to route, take your right hand, make a little pointer with your thumb, put your thumb over your workpiece, and whichever way your finger's pointing, that's the direction you want to go. The reason that trick is helpful is sometimes you want to go the opposite way when you're like routing the inside of a handle like that. So, I'm going to use my little cordless router, and we're going to knock this out. So apparently routing epoxy can be a little bit messy. Okay, I'm gonna go vacuum this off because that is just gonna drive me nuts. I mean, it looks like my router is literally growing hair. So with any kind of cutting board or charcuterie board that's going to be in contact with water, or if you're going to put food on it and then rinse it off, I always like to wet down or raise the grain with water on the cutting board before completely finishing my sanding. So what I've done, you just saw me sand 60 grit, 120 grit, 180 grit. This board is looking very matte. It's looking kind of dull. We're about to fix that. But what I'm going to do first is raise the grain. So I'm just going to wipe this down with a damp rag. I usually use like an old t-shirt. Let this sit for about 30 minutes so it's dry. And then we're going to go back to 120, and we're going to go like 120, 180, 220, 320. What that's going to do is raise the grain and then pop it so that when someone rinses off this board, it doesn't get rough. If you don't do this step, your board's gonna feel amazing. You're gonna sell it to your customer or give it to a friend, whatever. And the first time they wash it, it's gonna get really rough. We don't want that to happen. So yeah, let me grab a towel really quickly. Really, the main thing is you just want to wipe down the wood. You don't really need to get the epoxy wet. It's not bad if you do. This is kind of giving us a sneak preview of how this is going to look when it's finished, except we're going to make it even pop a little bit more. To let this dry as quickly as possible, I'm going to throw down some of these finishing triangles, and I can set that there so we get good airflow on both sides of the charcuterie board. This should be dry in like 15 or 20 minutes. By the way, these finishing triangles, links to those are down in the description, along with links to all the other tools you've seen me use in this video. Hey, while that charcuterie board is drying, if this video has been helpful for you so far, if you've been inspired to make something in the shop, hit the like button. It's right below your screen where you're watching this video. It is kind of the way to give back on YouTube. It means the world to me, really helps me out. So thank you so much. Let's keep on going with this build. So now we have this board sanded all the way up to 320 grit. You could probably stop at 220 grit. I've done that with a lot of cutting boards and charcuterie boards in the past. For this board, I just wanted to give a little bit more gloss, a little bit more shine. So usually the higher you go up in the grit, the more shiny something looks. Whereas if you want something to look more matte, then just stop at 220. So what I'm gonna do is wipe this down with a dry cloth, try to get some of the really fine dust off of this board. Then we're gonna use some Odie's oil. I think I have some right here actually. We're gonna use some Odie's oil for the finish. This is a great all natural finish that will leave your boards looking and feeling amazing. It's a little bit more expensive, but I promise you, if you buy this and use it on charcuterie boards or tabletops or whatever, you will love it. It's definitely worth the extra money, in my opinion. I have had a ton of fun making the charcuterie board. This might be one of the epoxy projects that has turned out best for me. I do wish that when I was faking this live edge, I was a little more dramatic with like the curves. I know I traced an actual live edge board, but I think sometimes when you're faking something that's realistic, you want to be more unrealistic so it looks real. If that makes sense. It just almost looks like I was trying to make a straight cut and didn't make a straight line. So anyways, that's probably the only thing I would change about this board. Like I said, I'm giving this to a friend, but I would probably sell this board for the neighborhood of $60 to $70 if I was at a craft show or selling this online. Hey, thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to check out Crafted Elements molds or templates or any other tools in this video, they're down in the description. And if you enjoyed this video, check out one of these two videos. I'd love to see you there.